I've got a button, yeah, but I've got a bigger button.
And mine works.
And mine works, exactly, yes. Another day, another video.
Welcome back to the Gunners Club with Gunner, of course with Seuss. Do yourself a favour if you want to get to sleep at night. If you don't want to be terrified, don't do as I did and recently buy and read a book called Nuclear War. It is chilling. When I was a child, I went to the cinema and I saw a film with Matthew Broderick called War Games.
Oh,
It was set in 1983. I didn't realise just how factually accurate this film was. So one of the great things that was set in the 80s, so you had, the beautiful romance in it, you had a hopeful America in it, but the sinister thing which hid behind that was a spectre of a nuclear apocalypse, and that's what we're talking about today. Don't worry, we'll have some fun, I promise you.
I mean, as much fun as you can have in a nuclear apocalypse.
Well, we're in our shelter.
Well, that's it, yeah. With a fully working bar, I might add.
I didn't realise that film was made in the very same year, 1983, that a 2-week exercise of simulating nuclear wars was actually conducted in America. It was called Operation High Profit. What they did was they went through every conceivable model as to how a nuclear war could look and to see the survivability of it, to see effectively if you could have some sort of a winner. It didn't matter how they played it. It didn't matter if they went through what they called a bolt out of the blue occasion where you were simply hit, you didn't expect it. Or let's say turn the tables, you would simply hit the other side without them being aware of it. No matter how you tried to seek advantage or strategize, eventually there was basically an assured destruction for both parties. Now in the game War Games, we've got a young person who accidentally trips off a computer to believing that the world is under attack. It simulates these number of different strategies and attacks. And it does it quite simply by going through what we'd call in Australian noughts and crosses or tic-tac-toe in America, and realises that, hey, there's actually no way of winning this game. It's a zero sum.
That's right.
And then what it does is it goes across and it translates that to intercontinental ballistic missile warfare and discovers the strange conclusion, strange game. The only way to win is not to play.
That's it.
And that's essentially what I've learnt. I mean, it should be quite obvious. Going back to the Cold War, the USSR had approximately 36,000 nuclear bombs. America had about 23,000 or so. There are about 60,000 nuclear weapons between the two. Certainly enough to do all the world many times over. And I've heard the saying, but once is actually enough.
Yeah.
And once, in fact, is enough. You see, the thing with nuclear war is this. The only thing which is actually stopping it from occurring between the people who have it is a psychological deterrence. Now, there's a concept you were telling me of just outside, MAD.
The MAD doctrine, which the US actually adopted publicly at the UN Security Council, and they said that they're adopting this strategy going forward, that in a conflict they will fight a conventional war until they are losing, at which point they will fight a tactical nuclear war until they are losing. Following that, they will fight a strategic nuclear war, again until they are losing, and then they will destroy the world. And this was a public statement.
Idea of mutually assured destruction usually refers to a nuclear war where you'll have one party which is under significant threat, has promised the other party that the other party will not sustain that war at all. That's effectively the concept of it. No one is coming out of this fight alive.
Yep.
Some people have even gone so far as to the idea of a dead man's trigger. One side decides to respond proportionately and is overwhelmed by the barrage that the other side volleys back. Even if there's nobody left in command, there are the safeguards already put into place that every single missile in the arsenal of the losing side will be fired, even if there's not a human being alive to do that. This is actually quite horrifying. The most scary things, I think, which exist in our world today are the Ohio-class nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed submarines. Now, Australia's looking at getting Virginia-class. We're talking about the big boys here, the Ohio-class, okay? There's 14 of them in the American fleet. Each one of them is capable of being armed with 80 warheads. Each one of those individual warheads has the power of 20 times all firepower used in the Second World War, and I'm including the 2 nuclear bombs that were actually
But they
used.
all each individually have multiple warheads, which are separately guided.
So, remember, destroying the world once is actually enough.
It is a breathtaking sight that few will ever see. A nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarine 550 feet long, surfacing briefly in the Pacific Ocean. With 20 strategic nuclear missiles on board, this submarine is America's most heavily armed warship.
I'd say it's the most powerful force in the world right now.
Vice Admiral Bill Houston is the commander of U.S. submarine forces, including this ship.
You cannot stop a nuclear war if one side possesses a submarine and nuclear weapons on board. They are unstoppable. Tests have even shown between military, even if you have in your crosshairs the offending submarine and you're tailing it in your own submarine and it's ready to launch, you cannot stop it launching. It's a foregone conclusion. Generally, when these things launch, they're, let's say, around 1,000 kilometers off the coast of their enemy. You can imagine the missile is launched from the water. It doesn't go to great heights above the water, so it's not so easily tracked by satellites and things like that. It really is game over. Good night, Irene. Generally what would happen is that the president would have 3 minutes warning to make a decision. He might be asleep because it's late at night. He might be asleep because he's old and infirm, like someone who still has the triggers. It's not a metaphor to say that people have the nuclear trigger so much. People have what's called the football bag. Essentially, one of those is in the possession of the military aid for the president, and one as well for the vice president. It ensures that they've got communication if they want to actually go ahead and launch a nuclear attack. It also contains a biscuit, which is basically like a card with the verification codes. And it's also got the black book. The black book is particularly horrific. Now, I've heard it described as a recipe to end mankind, or a menu which is easy to select off, where you select, this is the scenario that I want to counter, and these are what the horrific repercussions will be. Someone said it's as easy to choose what you want as it is from the menu at Denny's. If you want eggs and bacon for breakfast. That's essentially what it is. For that reason, you find one always with the aid for the president and for the vice president. Similarly, the Kremlin has those as well, and they call it by the Russian word for football. It's just one of the things which they've adopted. 3 different ways, really, that you can launch your nuclear weapons. One is from a submarine, which I said I believe is the most dangerous, the one to be feared the most, because you simply cannot stop it. You simply cannot deter it. The other one is land-based. Now, America has about 400 land-based, ready-to-use ICBMs. They're called Minutemen. You know why they're called Minutemen?
I'm sure you'll educate me.
You can arm them and fire them within 1 minute.
Wow, okay.
So let's say that America has an arsenal of about 5,000 missiles, but 400 of them are standing in silos. Minutemen ready to go within 1 minute. Despite what Reagan said, despite what you'll ever hear, you cannot recall a nuclear missile. Once a nuclear missile has been commanded and is in flight, it can't be stopped. It can't be redirected. Off it goes. So that's the same for a submarine, or the same for a Minuteman. The only way you really could stop one is if it was a plane, and what we're saying is we're carrying it on the plane, and we have the plane redirected. Okay, so it hasn't yet effectively fired, but it's in the bomber. We've stopped it that way. A lot of these bombers, I think, are really on a one-way mission, if that's what they're doing. The game, War Games, was really interesting because The people at the control room were not certain if these had actually been fired or they were just hallucinations or spectres on the screen. Now, for America, that's a real problem. For Russia and China, not so much. It's very easy to verify if something has been launched because Russian spies typically, and I'd imagine probably Chinese as well, tend to buy land around the 400 sites of where the Minutemen are. It's an actual fact. And their job is to stay there for however long, and when one is actually eventually launched, to dial it in and to say, this is no duff, this has actually happened, this has been fired. These locations generally do not change. They're known to the public. They're known to other governments. They're known to the spies who live close by. It can be verified that these actually were fired. So let's say that it can be verified and we've got some certainty of what's going on. Well, we don't always. Russia has got a particularly bad system for verifying things. Because their satellites can only look sideways, they can't have what they call I think they call it a top-down direction. That means if they're looking, for example, at the heavens, they might see a cumulus cloud and think that it's a plume of smoke from a nuclear missile. They might see a reflection of the sun or the sun itself and see it's fire or incendiary, a detonation or actually the rocket fuel propulsion of the missile. Also, very critically, they miscount the number of missiles which are being fired. So you could have a volley, let's say, of 20 missiles. It might appear like 100 to them. Now, we've got to take our hands off to one chap who was actually in the command room during the Cold War, who saw what he believed to be on his Russian monitoring screen 5 ICBMs fired by the Americans.
Okay. I do recall reading something about that.
Now, it's because of him, his human element, and his independent thinking that we're still alive today. What he decided was, he rationalised this. Look, it would make no sense for the Americans to start a nuclear war with only a volley of 5 nuclear weapons. So what did he do? Gracefully and thankfully he did nothing. He did not even report it to his next higher up. Tellingly though, in the movie War Games, the exact opposite happened. Because the volley of missiles was entire, it was everything that America had fired at Russia, it was decided that, oh, hang on a second, this can't in fact be real, because there's no way the enemy would fire everything that they had, their entire arsenal, leaving no room for compromise, no room for bargaining, no room for de-escalation or escalation or winning a prize.
Or for that matter, even a second volley.
Second volleys are a very interesting thing as well. Some people say there's no de-escalating a nuclear war. Once it's started, it's hard not to.
So, all those things we learnt in school, you know, the duck and cover under your desk, are you saying that that's a fallacy? Are you saying that that's not going to help us?
It's just kiss your ass goodbye.
Yeah, that's what it is.
America has a policy of fire upon warning. Fire upon warning means this: if you strongly believe that there is an oncoming missile towards you, then you fire back. You do not wait until there's actual impact on your territory.
Yep.
They still have discretion, though, to actually change that policy if they want to. However, Putin has very recently said that they too have a fire upon warning policy, and that once it's verified, again, remember how bad their systems are, they will not wait to absorb the impact of any missiles. With America, we're not 100% certain. With Russia, they say in fact that no, they will in fact launch.
With one of his Ukraine bluffs about his nuclear missiles, he was pushing his bluff that one little bit further. He says, we're going to fire a missile just to show them that we do actually mean business. It wasn't going to actually be fired in a way to destroy anything, but we're going to fire a missile just to show them that we mean business.
Yeah,
and it exploded in the silo, I believe.
There hasn't been a lot of testing, so we wonder how much of that still
How much
works.
maintenance has been done on them.
But also we fear a lot about Russian technology. For example, in 2006, North Korea had their first successful nuclear test.
Yep.
2017 was their 6th and most powerful nuclear test. They now have ICBMs, which means that they can transit over 5,500 kilometres in distance, and that they have thermonuclear, so fission-powered. Where they got their rockets from, we believe You only need one, and then you backwards engineer that it was stolen technology from the collapse of the USSR.
Yeah, that's
Went
right.
into someone's hands, lo and behold, it had a market value, and it found its market value. The time of Clinton, it was believed that when they thought that North Korea had but 2 nuclear weapons that they could be bargained with, that what you could do was offer, I guess, carrots and milk, economic food aid to them, and have them relinquish the program. Now, remember that violence is a bargaining power. It sounds horrific, but it is, and we're talking about pure violence here, where things at a nuclear level like this. And there's been many attempts over the last few decades to curtail the nuclear expansion of North Korea. In all occasions without fail, they have broken the agreement.
Yes.
And we continued tests. Only recently, in Trump's first term, there was another attempt at bargaining again. The usual thing is for energy and also for food. He decided there would be no relief to sanctions at all until there was a complete and absolute scrapping of all of their nuclear weapons. They didn't agree to that, but have a look what's happening now. And of course, there's been the saber rattling between Trump, remember, with Rocket Man?
Yes, I've got a button, yeah, but I've got a bigger button.
And mine works.
And mine works, exactly, yes.
In the book Nuclear War, the true horror story is one of North Korea, where effectively we have a nuclear attack without what we can fathom as any reason. It's a demented attack, and it only involves a couple of nuclear missiles. But, of course, it's all about how you fire them. It's thought now that North Korea now has an arsenal of 50 nuclear weapons. It's 50 states in America.
It has been said by a good number of intelligence high-up people that as horrifying as nuclear war would be, well, it's the end of mankind in reality. The truth of it is we really don't have that much to fear in reality from state actors with nuclear weapons. What we actually do need to fear is non-state actors with nuclear weapons that basically don't have anything to lose.
I 100% disagree. I would have agreed with you before reading this book.
Okay.
But the problem is that we do not understand the intents of the other side. Russia as well has also got not only a very bad monitoring system, they have got deep distrust of the West, as in fact we have towards the East, but their communication lines are often very poor. Now the hotline, which is used for emergency purposes, they telecast usually in advance before it will be used to not cause any unnecessary drama. It's rarely picked up. If it's picked up, for example in this book, they refuse to talk to who is talking to them. They insist, let's say, on talking to a particular office holder and not the deputy who's talking to them. That deep level of distrust, misinformation, so they're not understanding in fact what's been fired. Now, if North Korea actually fired against America and America wanted to reply, they could do it by submarine if they had a submarine close by. They could choose jets, but if they wanted to use the Minutemen, they do not have the rocket range to fire directly. They would have to fire over Russian territory. So you could imagine if you're invaded by the missiles of America, even if you believe in your heart of hearts, okay, they're telling us the truth as to what this is all about, they're actually firing on North Korea, the chance for the nuclear button to be pressed is really quite high. It's very acute. There's no de-escalating a sense of emotion. The immediacy of when a decision has to be made, generally 3 minutes, can be less if there's a close-by submarine or there's a bolt-out-of-the-blue attack by an aircraft. Now, I know the Geneva Convention forbids firing on nuclear power plants. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Let's say, for example, if it was chosen by an enemy of America to hit one of those power plants. Let's talk about North Korea for this. Fukushima, we don't realize how lucky Japan was because 3 of the 6 core reactors came very close to meltdown. That would have meant thousands of years of radioactivity, a no-go area for a large portion of the country. You can imagine if a nuclear power station with the spent rods was hit, let's say, in California. Basically, it's like the power of a nuclear bomb squared. It's just exponential what the damage could be. Not only that, but other man-made objects, for example, things like the large dams at the Yangtze River in China if they were hit. Imagine a catastrophe. You've got an assured destruction of that man-made object and the flooding of we don't know how many people. I've got to tell you, I've never been so chilled to my bone as having read this. And really, what is the way around it? Well, greater minds than me have gone through the game theory of it, staged call and responses to see what would happen, and none of them come out with a satisfactory solution. In war games, they decided that they'd test the officers out to see how they'd react if they were called, in fact, to press the trigger.
Yep.
So what generally happens is the football bag comes out, the president gets the codes, he reads the codes, goes to the black book, selects from the recipe what he wants to have happen, and it's relayed either to the submarine, to the plane, let's say, or to the Minutemen. Two officers then inside those stations will verify the codes independently, and like you see in the old things, turn the keys and make that happen. Yep. But who actually turns the keys? In the movie War Games, 22% of the officers actually failed to respond. They found in the heart of hearts they couldn't do it. So in the movie, they decided they would replace that one human station with a machine that would automatically go ahead and do that. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? People would say that you need to have human control. Not only that, but you need to have control separating military from civilians, which is the reason why the people in charge of the military are not generals. There's actually 2 civilian stations in government. Above that, you want that separation. But the biggest problem is the heart of man, the dark heart of man. I mean, let's go back to things like the war on the Kurds.
But not always a dark heart. You talked about earlier about that Russian guy who was thinking that there's 5 nuclear missiles heading our way, and his heart said, yeah, maybe not.
His heart said maybe not, but let's think about things like the war on the Kurds, or think about, not long after that, the Iraqi war in Kuwait and the scorched earth policy.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of, again, similar to mutually assured destruction, let's make sure that no of our foes can gather our harvest or sit upon our stockyard rail. The scary thing is that's actually from the Australian $10 bill, that piece of poetry. So it exists in our Australian psyche as well. But effectively what he decided to do, Saddam Hussein, was have the 700 oil wells set on fire.
That's right.
An environmental disaster for no reason of any gain for himself at all. But the heart of man can be that dark. The heart
It was
of man,
basically, if I can't have it, neither can you.
but
That's
the
basically
heart
what
of
it
man
was.
can also be that light.
Yep.
Just going back to war games, it's a strange game. The only way to win it,
Is to not play.
yeah.
A cute bedtime story for you guys. Hope you don't get nightmares, but there you go. We make videos that are interesting.
If you like what you hear, like, subscribe. We'll join you on the next adventure.
Good on you guys.